I can only tell you that what happened was I felt a warm golden glow flow over me from head to toe, 5-10 seconds, I don't know. And when it left, it took with it all traces of anger and hatred and revenge. And in their place was a complete and total forgiveness for everyone involved.
My goodness.
And that terrified me.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of anything like that.
Oh.
I didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe I was finally, giving in and was going nuts. But I checked my heart, and when I did, I realized it was true. That really had happened. Now, why he chose to give me that miracle forgiveness on the night of the shootings, I had no idea.
So that was on the night of the shooting?
Yeah, that was about 2 hours after I got shot, or maybe three.
If you would like weekly content that builds your faith and helps you walk out all that God has for your life, subscribe and be a part of LifeFamily.
Mr. Whitaker, thank you for being here today.
Oh, gosh, thank you for the opportunity.
You drove from a long, long distance, Houston.
Well, it wasn't that bad. It's
Who's
a nice,
your,
easy drive.
Do you were born in Houston?
I was. I grew up there.
And you went to the University of Houston. So you're a cougar.
I am.
You haven't had the joy.
There aren't very many of you in that room, but
wait, that was so close.
There's one Christian in this house.
Yeah. You learn to do this. This will.
That's hard.
It'll help you feel better.
Yeah.
It'll help you feel better.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Now your family, Tricia. How did you meet Tricia?
I had a great family. I met Tricia when I was in college, and she was a senior in high school. And it was actually a blind date. So if there's anybody out there that has been turning down blind dates, my suggestion is to think twice about it, because it worked out for me pretty well. Anyway, we dated for 4 years, and a couple of years after we got married, our first son came along. That was Bart. And 3 years after that, here comes Kevin.
Oh, boy. Great family.
Yes,
Did y'all have
was.
a favorite song?
A
that you can
favorite
think
song?
of?
Well, everybody had their own favorite songs.
Yeah. Was it a Phillips, Craig, and Dean song?
Well, I was about to say.
Yeah.
Well, there's a story about that.
Okay. This is a beautiful family. Just looking at the picture, it's just, the all-American family.
Yeah,
Your boys grew up in Sugar Land?
Yes, they did.
Went to Sugar Land Middle School, high school, so forth?
A little bit about my kids. When Bart was 11, well, here, let me do this. Kevin was really the athlete in the family. He played golf and baseball. He was a very accomplished gymnast, and when he was very, very popular, he was the high school mascot in his senior year. Bart and I got involved with distance cycling. Our neighbor, Dr. Rod, lost his dental practice suddenly because he developed a very strange muscle illness, and we didn't know what it was. But when Bart was 11, he saw a sign for the MS 150, the bike ride from Houston to Austin. And although we didn't know what Rod had, and although I was very sure I didn't want to spend 2 days on a bicycle with an 11-year-old, there was no stopping him. And so we started training in our 40-pound Schwinn's, and those cyclists out there can appreciate that pain.
I don't know what that means.
Well, it's a very heavy bicycle.
Okay.
But we competed in our first MS that next spring. We really got to enjoy cycling, and although we were really slow that first year, we got to be pretty fast over time. And I was on the steering committee for the MS, and we ended up doing, I think I did 12 of them.
Wow.
And thousands and thousands and thousands of miles together training.
What was your career? You grew up, you're COO of a...
Well, I after several jobs after college, I ended up getting a bean counter job at a large commercial construction company. And I actually stayed there for 30 years, and over time became the COO, which I was still a bean counter, but the beans were more interesting.
Bigger beans.
Bigger beans and nicer title.
Nicer
But I
title.
ended up having to retire early from that as a result of a family tragedy that is the basis for why I'm here today.
So what about faith in your family? How'd you come to the Lord? How'd you become a Jesus follower?
I grew up in church. We went I never thought of myself of anything except a Christian.
Yeah.
But I grew up in a liberal denomination, and I didn't really know too much about the Bible. And as I grew older, I was just gotten hungrier and hungrier. And when I was in my 30s, I got involved with a group of guys that were charismatic, and they were conservative believers in the Bible. And do you want me to tell that story?
Well, let me just say this. So, did your entire family go to church?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah,
everybody went to church?
Yeah.
No problems?
No.
Did your boys grow up in the
Yes.
student ministry?
Yes.
They were
all
active?
the way through. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
So faith has always been part of your of the Whitaker family.
It has.
And you were a close-knit family?
Very close-knit. We were very active. Tricia we were fortunate enough that when Bart came along, Tricia left her job as a elementary school teacher and was able to stay at home. So she had lots of time with the kids, and I was very active too. I was actually, I coached everything until they got old enough to benefit from somebody who knew what they were doing. And then I became the gopher coach.
Yeah.
But we were very active.
I love that. There's a saying, particularly for families, parenting, that the same water that hardens the egg softens the carrot. There is an intrinsic temperament that every child is born with, and you can be born in the same family, going to the same church, having the same experiences. The same water hardens the egg, softens the carrot.
Yeah.
Bart and Kevin, completely different in temperament. Your son, your oldest son, Bart, he was going to graduate, was it from Sam Houston State? Sam Houston State. And so you and Tricia and wanted to throw him a party, just kind of a congratulations, son.
Yeah, we went out for dinner the night that he finished his last final. And when we came back, Kevin went to the front door. He was a sophomore in college at that time, and stepped inside. There was a loud noise. Tricia, who was right behind him, said, "Oh no," and another loud noise. Now, guys, I have been around guns all my life, but I honestly did not recognize those sounds. The idea that there might be an assassin in my own house, it just never crossed my mind. So I stepped up to the door and looked inside to see what was happening. And there was a guy standing there, and he was close, maybe 7, 8 feet, and he had a ski mask on. But it still didn't make any sense to me, and I didn't know what was happening. But the next instant, I was hit hard in the chest, and I fell back on the front porch, and I couldn't get up. And that's when I knew that those sounds had been gunshots, and there had been 3 of them, one for each of us. Before I could call out and warn Bart, there was a 4th blast, and I thought, my God, he shot all of us. Why? And I'll tell you, it's this weird feeling knowing that you're about to die. And there may be some people in the room who have experienced that. What was surprising to me was how calm I was. I told God that if it was my time, I was ready, but to please protect my family. And I called out to each one of them, but I got no responses except for some quiet, wet coughs coming from Tricia. Now, I never heard those kind of coughs before, but instinctively I knew they were the sound of someone trying to clear their lungs from filling with blood. Well, all of a sudden the police were there, and 3 paramedics started working on me, trying to keep me alive, but nobody would tell me anything about my family until I overheard a policeman ask another, "What about the DOA?" Which is dead on arrival. And that's how I learned that and I didn't know, maybe by now all of my family was dead. I began to shake and realized I was going into shock. Well, Trish and I were taken by 2 Life Flight helicopters to Houston's Medical Center, and Bart joined me a few minutes later by ambulance. He'd been shot in the arm wrestling with the shooter. Now later I learned that they had stopped working on Tricia about halfway through the flight, and that Kevin had died almost instantly right inside my front door.
Yes, Lord. When you got to the hospital, you have you're mortally wounded. Chest shot? Shot you in the chest. And then they're working on you. When did you start asking, like, where is my wife? Where are my sons?
I figured out right away that when one of the administrators met me at the helicopter and said that my son would be here soon by ambulance, it didn't take rocket science to figure out that there were now 2 of us in the family. So I knew that Tricia and Kevin had died. They didn't tell me, but so I was really wrestling with my faith that night. When I was finally alone in the room, my emotions were bouncing everywhere, but they always came back to this deep desire for revenge because I just wanted to hurt this person who had stolen my life. And I was mad at God too, not just for allowing it to happen, but for seemingly to lie to me. Because there's a verse in the Bible that I've used many times when I was comforting others, but when I tried to apply it to myself that night, I couldn't do it. It's Romans 8:28, and it says, "We know that in all things God will work all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his service." And I thought, how is this even possible?
How is this working for good?
Yeah, how is God going to take the murders of my wife and son and work them for good? But I had argued for years that faith in anything is an act of willpower because it has nothing to do with our emotions. You know, our emotions will lie to us. And if you don't believe it, help us make bad choices.
Yeah.
I think about half of the country western songs I like are involving people that make bad choices based on their emotions. No, faith is when you know something is, when you believe something is true, but everything around you is shouting that it can't be, and yet you choose by force of will to believe it and to trust it because you believe that God is going to be faithful in everything that he does.
So you're trying to recover from your own mortally wounded self. Your incredible wife, oh my, what a doll. You know that she is deceased, and your youngest son is deceased, and your oldest son is wounded. What's your heart going through? I know you're asking God, where are you?
Yes.
What's happening? But just emotionally.
Well, I realized that at that point I was either going to throw the Bible out because if Romans 8:28 was not true, you know, what else was there that I couldn't trust? But I also knew that I needed God now more than I ever had in my life. And I was, between a rock and a hard place because what do you do? And I wrestled with it. But I finally decided to trust God through it. I said, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I believe that you are going to bring something good to somebody as a result of the shootings. Now, I may never know what they are, but I believe you. I trust you to do this. And the moment that I settled that in my mind, the first of 2 really strange things happened. God gave me a word-for-word sentence in my mind. Now, most of the time, when God talks to me, it's the way he speaks to most people. I'll be reading the Bible and a verse will just jump off the page as an answer to something that I've been wrestling with. Or when I'm praying, there'll be that still quiet whisper in the back of my mind. But that night, he gave me a word-for-word sentence. And it was good. Now, what about the shooter?
Wait. What now?
Yeah, what an odd thing to ask.
You feel like the Lord was saying to you.
Oh, I was very clear. There was no question about it. It was very clear.
What about the shooter?
What about the shooter? And when I thought about it, reading between the lines, I think what he was saying was, thank you for trusting me in the Romans 8:28 thing, but are you going to trust me in the really hard things? Things like vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And I saw where he was going with this.
Yeah.
He was going to ask me to forgive this guy.
Forgive the shooter
Yeah.
that took your wife,
Yes.
your youngest son.
Yes. And I knew I couldn't do it.
No.
I couldn't do it. But I also knew that there's a couple other verses in the Bible. One of them is that with God, all things are possible. And I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity to test those too. So I just decided I was going to
grappling in your faith.
Yes, I was going to give him an opportunity to.
It must have just shocked the community. Sugar Land, Texas. I would imagine the crime rate is nothing.
Yeah, it was. I'm not sure this is true, but I was told that it was really the first murder in like 10 or 15 years in Sugar Land. So it was a spectacular deal. It was on all the local network news that night, the 10 o'clock news. But I need to tell you what happened after I wrestled with that, because this is the payoff. When I told him that I trusted him, and that I believed that he was going to do something good, and he gave me that message, I realized he was asking me to forgive this guy, and I also realized I couldn't do it. So I said, God, if you really want me to forgive this person, you're going to have to do all the work. About all I can do is ask you to help me. And so that's what I did. And as soon as I asked him to help me forgive, the second strange thing happened. And it was the really weird one, and I can't explain that for sure. I can only tell you that what happened was I felt a warm, golden glow flow over me from head to toe, 5-10 seconds, I don't know. And when it left, it took with it all traces of anger and hatred and revenge. And in their place was a complete and total forgiveness for everyone involved.
My goodness.
And that terrified me.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of anything like that.
Oh.
I didn't know what was happening. I thought maybe I was finally, giving in and was going nuts. But I checked my heart, and when I did, I realized it was true. That really had happened. Now, why he chose to give me that miracle forgiveness on the night of the shootings, I had no idea.
So that was on the night of the shooting?
Yeah, that was about 2 hours after I got shot, or three, maybe three.
Now, I know we're fast forwarding here through a lot of detail that people can find. The tragedy of losing your family was even further traumatized when you learned it was your oldest son that hired the assassin.
That's correct.
And that was complicit in trying to destroy your family. I don't know when you got that news, if you were in the hospital or not in the hospital, but what was that like for the authorities to tell you, and it was your oldest son?
Well, they didn't really know that yet, but they suspected. And it was the next morning. So I was shot. 3 hours later, I wrestled with God. He gave me that miracle forgiveness. The next morning, I found out what God may have been up to with the miracle forgiveness, that instant forgiveness. Because the police told me that Bart had not, he was not about to graduate, and he actually wasn't even in school that semester. And although they didn't come right out and say it, it was pretty clear that he had become their number one suspect for having arranged the murders. They thought to cover up for, failures in school. Now we know that he had a serious mental illness, but nobody knew that back then. Back then, I didn't think he was involved at all. But I did know that his faith was not as strong as Trish's or Kevin's or mine. And if he was going to be the focus of an investigation that might actually lead to a trial one day, I knew that he was going to need somebody in his corner, someone who would walk through the whole thing with him, someone who could model for him the unconditional love that God has for all of us, including murderers.
But in your wildest imagination,
No, I didn't.
your oldest son,
No. We didn't see it.
The deepest wounds are cut by the ones
Yeah.
who know us best. So they arrest your son. He goes to trial, capital murder charges.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know as the father, did they inform you that we're going to seek the death penalty?
Oh, gosh, yeah. He was arrested in Mexico and brought back to trial. And for 18 months, I and all of my family and all of Trish's family, in other words, every victim in this crime, pleaded with the district attorney to accept 2 back-to-back 40-year life sentences in return for his guilty plea. But they would not back away from pursuing the death penalty. So in 2007, he was convicted for arranging the murders and was sentenced to die.
What was that like to sit through that trial as a father? You've lost your family. Through the Holy Spirit download, the glowing golden light. I want that golden light.
Yeah.
I want everybody to have that golden light.
Believe me, I
And now you're fighting for the son that murdered your family. It's just so much there. I just wish we had more time. But as you're sitting there and you're hearing this, when they say guilty and your son stands and they say, and they pronounce the death sentence.
Yeah.
Well, what was that like as a father?
Well, you can imagine it was one of the worst days of my life, and I just felt very dead inside. We had tried so hard to raise him well. We did not see the signs of the illness that was there. It was awful. He was sentenced to death and spent 11 years on death row. But there's some blessings here too, because during that 11 years, he lived an exemplary life. He was a model prisoner, and he actually helped diffuse problems inside death row. And he helped some people get their GEDs, learn English as a second language, and was actually a benefit. 3 guards actually wrote letters requesting that he be considered for commutation. And believe me, if you know anything about the prison system, it's a pretty strict code of silence and things like that. And I was very impressed with those 3 guys for doing that. But they believe strongly that Bart would have should be given the life in prison instead of the death penalty.
So there's so much here I'd love to get into, but here comes the execution date.
Mm-hmm.
And you were actually at our church the week before, I believe, he was going to be executed. I may not have those dates exactly right.
Close to that.
But I remember you were wrestling with, will you be in the chamber when they execute your son? Will yours be the last face he ever sees, or will you not be there? Where did you land on that? Because I just can't imagine being faced with that.
Well, I had told him all along that if it came down to it and he was executed, that I was going to be in the visitation room through the glass, because I wanted him to see me knowing that there was someone who cared, that he wasn't there alone. But everybody was trying to convince me not to do that. They said that they did not want me to have the last thing that I remembered of my son would be for him to close his eyes.
Oh.
And as it turned out, anyway.
Oh, my goodness.
It was hard.
So I called you. Do you remember me calling you?
Oh, gosh, yes, of course. Are you kidding? Yeah.
You were on your way to Huntsville.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You were across the street in a chapel?
We were.
And I called you?
Uh-huh.
What did I say? I don't even remember.
I
was
don't
just like,
remember a
Lord,
whole
help
lot
me. I
about
don't
that
know what
day.
to say.
I don't remember a whole lot about that day. It was pretty awful. As it turned out, the Pardons and Parole Board reviewed all of the things that he'd done for the 11 years that he was on death row, and chose to recommend to the governor that he be commuted. So 30 minutes before the poison drip was to start, the governor commuted his sentence to life in prison.
30 minutes.
30 minutes. Yeah.
I called the governor. There was a person in my church that gave me his number, and I called the governor on your behalf. I got his right-hand man, or whoever that was, and I pleaded with him. He was so rude, angry, hung up on me.
Did he really?
Yes, he did.
Well, you're in good company.
But apparently there was enough of us,
Yeah.
and the people who were looking.
Yeah.
What
No,
what was your
eternally
heart going
thankful.
through when you heard? Did they call you and say he's been?
We were in that church two blocks from where the execution would take place, and we were holding hands in prayer. There were about a dozen of us, and my phone rang, and it was our attorney, and he was telling me that he had just received a call from the governor's office saying that they had chosen to commute the sentence. And so it was, he'd had 2 days to make that call and didn't. So we just knew that it was a matter of that we were never going to see Bart again. So it was. I was pretty elated.
Oh my goodness, Mr. Whitaker, there's a lot of us in this room, a whole lot watching all over Central Texas and then all over the world, who have had people wrong us. But I don't think any of us have ever experienced what you've experienced. And if you can forgive, we can forgive, because forgiveness is a gift to ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's not to the person. It's a gift to us.
It frees us up so that those, God says he has plans for us, and they're plans for good, not evil, so that we can have hope and a future. Well, our hope and our future is when we forgive, we're set free, and we become available for those new blessings. And so it's important.
Jesus said in Matthew 6:14, some of the hardest words in Scripture. These are such hard words. If you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. If you do not forgive others their sins, your heavenly Father will not forgive yours. Now, those, we like to skip over that. I don't that part. I'm going to another part of the Bible.
Yeah.
But it's there. It's in red.
Yeah.
In our Bible. Jesus said it. So to every one of you who have heard this impactful, true story, you were on Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah. The forgiveness angle was big. A number of shows, 48 Hours, 2020. I don't know. There's been a dozen.
So her fascination with you, inviting you to her show, was how you were able to forgive.
Mm-hmm. It was the forgiveness thing, because it was such an awful crime, and it was so unexpected that the victim would forgive. And I could just, God is faithful. When we trust him, when it doesn't make sense, he is so faithful. And my life was changed as a result of making that choice to trust him in Romans 8:28. I've remarried.
Yeah,
I
you
have
a
grandchildren
beautiful
now, which I never would have had before, thanks to my wife's kids. And my relationship with Bart is the best it's ever been. I just can't tell you how important it was for me to have made that decision.
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
Well, thank you, Pastor.
Thank you so much for being a part of our service today. And we hope and pray that this message touched your heart. And we want to hear from you. We want to get to know you. There are several links below this video that you can connect and let us know what's going on in your life. So we would love to invite you to do that. But most importantly, if you made a decision to follow Jesus today, that is amazing, and we want to celebrate you. I invite you to text Next Steps to 22999. We'll respond with a text and give you some resources and next steps for your faith journey. So we just celebrate you and want to invite you to do that. Thank you so much for making this decision to follow Jesus. It's amazing. So thank you again for being a part of our service today. We will see you next time.
If you don't have a home church, we would love to invite you to be part of LifeFamily. Remember, you belong here. Join us again next Sunday or any time throughout the week. Hit that bell so you never miss when we post a new video. Hope to see you again soon.